some ASMR, some spooky, scary stories, some true crime, murder mysteries, and other terrifying yet fascinating topics. Today, this video will be done in the style of ASMR, which I find extremely relaxing when I'm laying in bed, dozing off, and just wanting to hear gentle whispering, but also something that will keep my attention and fascinate me until I fall asleep. So, with that being said, today I will be reading a few stories that I found on Reddit under the subreddit titled Let's Not Meet. And all of these stories are extremely spooky and pretty fascinating. So, if you like this kind of content and this kind of video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, a like, or subscribe to my channel. I am going to try to do ASMR videos more often, so if you have any suggestions, let me know. Also, feel free to comment any freaky, scary stories that you may have experienced before in your lifetime in the comment section below. You can either remain anonymous, or I will give you credit in the next video if I decide to use your story. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started with some incredibly spooky and fascinating horror stories. Okay, so this first story is titled A Home Intruder Came Into My Room One Night. For reference, I am a 27-year-old woman, and this happened to me about 9 or 10 years ago when I was just a senior in high school. We lived in a pretty large house, but my siblings were all away at college or boarding school, so it was just only me and my parents in the house. I am a crazy light sleeper, so when I woke up in the dark and saw my alarm clock flashing 3:11 a.m., I was not too surprised. However, I was wide awake, not just groggily stirring in my sleep. I lay there wondering what had woken me when I heard very soft footsteps on the stairs outside my bedroom. The door to my room was parallel to the left side of the bed, and I happened to be laying with my back to the door. When the footsteps approached my door, I thought it must be one of my parents checking on me for some reason. Then the doorknob was turned super slowly. Still, I thought to myself they were just not trying to wake me. The door began to open again, slowly and carefully. It made a creaking noise no matter how slow it opened, so the person finally just shoved it the rest of the way to silence the creak. Still, my naive brain thought it was just one of my parents, until they clicked on a flashlight. I froze. Terror flooded me, and I remembered that I instantly broke out in sweat. They were behind me, and I was facing away, so they could not see my eyes wide open as they shone the beam straight on me. I always always used to think that if something like that ever happened, I would be such a badass and I would whip out of bed and punch them, attack them, shout, scream, or do something. But I could do nothing at all. All I could do was try to keep my breathing deep and even, despite the pounding of my heart, so that way the intruder would not know that I was awake. After about 10 seconds, they finally moved the light. I prayed and begged and bartered with anything that would listen to me as the intruder walked around my room, looking at all of my things. I could vaguely see their shape, large, bulky, almost like they were wearing two coats. They had a baseball cap on. They did not shine the flashlight on me again, and after a few solemnly slow minutes, which felt like an eternity, they left my room. I could still hear them though, walking around the rest of the second floor through my siblings' empty bedrooms. I was still sweating, still frozen in terror, not knowing what to do. I wanted to grab my phone and call my dad, who was sleeping downstairs. I wanted to call our landline so that the phone would ring and my parents would wake up. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to get up and run for my room. I wanted to cry, but I could not do any of those things. I was afraid that they would hear me, and I didn't know if they had a weapon and would try to hurt me or my parents. I wouldn't wish such helpless terror on my worst enemy. I don't know how, but I must have passed out from fear, or the adrenaline wore off and I fell asleep somehow, because the next thing I knew, it was 6 a.m. and I could hear my parents downstairs. I ran downstairs, and as calmly as I could, I asked them if one of them had been in my room last night. Their faces went blank, and they said no, they had not. It was the last straw. I broke down in sobs and told them, then someone was in my room last night. Even as I type this, my hands have begun shaking and I'm tearing up. The police were called, even though at that point there was little they could do. When my parents woke up, all of the doors to the outside were standing wide open, and there was a duffel bag at the bottom of the staircase. All that was inside was a coil of nylon rope and an empty USB flash drive. I do not at all want to think about what it was for. The intruder had not taken anything, and we have no idea why they left in what appeared to be a hurry. It took me about a week to be able to sleep in my own room, a sanctuary which then felt violated and frightening to me now. I carry pepper spray, sleep with a machete next to my bed, and double check my locks every night now. Hopefully this will never happen again, but if it does, hopefully I won't freeze up. It's been 10 years, and my most common nightmare is that someone is in my room, standing in the shadows, just watching me. Wow, okay, so that was pretty spooky. That's also one of my biggest fears, is waking up in the middle of the night and finding someone or something, whether it be human or whether it be paranormal in a sense. That's my biggest fear though, is in the middle of the night, getting the sensation that you're being watched, and then what happens if you do look up one time and there is actually somebody there, and what the fuck do they want? Or what if it is, if you believe in this sort of thing, a ghost? I don't know. Shit is creepy, life is strange, but let's get on to the next story. The next story is pretty long, but it is insane. Okay, so this next story is titled, I'm Convinced She Tried to Drown Me. This happened when I was still a child, so some of the details are very hazy, like my exact age when this happened. Also, English is not my first language, so apologies in advance for any mistakes. Yeah, you kinda just made one. Anyway, here we go. Not far from where I lived as a child, there is a place where one of the local rivers cascade over an old weir, and it's a really beautiful spot to bathe and swim during the summertime. Upstream from the weir is nice and calm. The river has a lot of fish and lots of pretty flowers on the river banks, and there's even a small kiosk and a place where you can rent paddle boats. If the weather is nice, there are usually a ton of people of all ages picnicking, sunbathing, swimming, fishing, and just hanging out. Families, couples, teenagers, seniors, everybody loves to go there. When I was a kid, my mom would also take me there pretty often, and it was usually a lot of fun. I always wanted to play in the water for hours, and my mom would quickly retire to her picnic blanket and pick up a book. I could already swim fairly well by age 6, but she still watched me closer when I was younger, so I would estimate that I was at least 8 when this happened, but no older than 11. It was a beautiful, warm summer day at the river. My mom was reading her book and let me explore the area and go off swimming on my own. As was normal on days like these, there were a lot of people, especially a lot of teenagers up at the crest of the weir, where most people entered the water. I'm afraid I don't remember the details about what happened, but I sort of befriended one of the teenage girls there. She was there on her own, and since I was still really young, I thought she was so mature and cool, basically just for being an older girl who was off doing things on her own. No idea how old she really was, as everybody who was older than you at that age is just old, but looking back, I would guess between 14 and 16. So she was really nice to me and seemed to enjoy hanging out with me, and I got to feel like I had an older sister for a while, which was nice. We spent some time exploring the riverbanks, diving, watching fish. At one point, we ended up at a spot where the water was about chest high for my friend and neck high for me. We were close to a group of other teenage girls who were about the same age as my new friend. I noticed one of them seemed really reluctant to get into the water and complained that it was quote-unquote freezing. I, at the time, was still a pretty loud-mouthed and brash child, a far cry from how I am now, and also really proud of my clearly superior swimming skills. So I turned to my friend and said something pretty harmless about that girl being a wuss or something like that. I wasn't loud, but somehow she heard. Snapped up and she immediately jumped into the water and came at me shouting, "What did you say? What did you say about me?" I was freaked out right away because her reaction was so sudden and she seemed so enraged in a way that was disproportionate to what I had said. I opened my mouth to defend myself somehow and maybe de-escalate, but before I even knew what was happening, she had grabbed me and pushed me underwater. I struggled for a moment she let me come up again. I think I heard my friend protest in the background, but I was mostly concerned with this girl who still had a death grip on both of my shoulders. She stared at me with a look that made me really uncomfortable, like she was fighting with herself or trying to control herself. "You say to me," she screamed at me. As scared as I was, I resented how helpless I felt and that I was being humiliated in front of this cool girl that I had just befriended. So I resolved to not showing any weakness. You know, this obnoxious thing kids do when someone tells them off and they just start giggling and laughing like they're laughing at you because they don't want anyone to see that they feel bad. I did that. I laughed right in her face, and right away she forced me back underwater again and held me down for quite a moment longer than the first time. When she let me come up again, she screamed right in my face, "You think this is funny? You like that? You want to laugh at me? You little bitch." I was coughing up water by this point and drooling all over myself, but I didn't know what else to do or say to make her stop, and the only thought I had left in my head was that I could not show any weakness. So I laughed at her again, and I may or may not have made another remark to the effect that, unlike her, I didn't mind a little water. I'm not sure anymore. What I distinctly remember and will forever remember is her eyes in that exact moment. To describe, but the closest I can get is by telling you that something seemed to leave her eyes, some spark or whatever you want to call it that normal, sane people have. It just flickered and went out. It suddenly looked like her eyes were just two pieces of hard painted glass stuck on her face, and there was nothing behind them. Now, I would have apologized then and begged her to just leave me alone, but it was too late. She grabbed me by the throat and by the hair and pushed me underwater again. I struggled as hard as I could, swirling up mud from the riverbed, grabbing at pebbles, but nothing helped. I thought, surely she will let me up in a moment. She just wants to scare me really bad. But I was running out of air quickly, and her grip on my throat did not ease up, not even a little bit. I tried scratching her arms, but I was starting to lose any sense of where up or where down was, or what exactly I was grabbing at. When I opened my eyes, everything was just muddy brown and full of bubbles. I realized I was going to drown right here. I was actually being killed by this complete stranger while the sun was shining peacefully, and we were surrounded by happy families, and nobody even realized what was happening. I'm grateful I don't fully remember what that felt like. When I try to think back to that moment, I just get this feeling of utter helplessness and loneliness. Suddenly, I was breathing air. I was completely disoriented, coughing and puking up water, and there was a lot of shouting around me. My friend was holding me above water and shouting in the direction of the group of girls who were forcefully leading my attacker away while she was screaming at me and my friend, while her friends were screaming at her. Just a lot of noise in general, and I have no recollection of what anyone was saying. I was just busy inhaling and enjoying the air again. After I had calmed down somewhat, my new friend apologized for stepping in so late, saying she and the other girls took a moment to process what was actually happening before they started trying to pull my attacker off of me. It took all of their efforts combined to get her to let me go. I was deeply, deeply shaken because I was entirely sure she had just attempted to murder me right then and there. I just knew from the look in her eyes save face for my friend, I tried to laugh it off. I did a lousy job because I was shivering all over and my voice was trembling. I don't know if my friend had realized at any point how serious the situation actually was, or if she thought she was just stopping some bullying. But whatever she thought, she bought me ice cream and rented us a paddle boat to cheer me up, and we watched some birds, and I'm grateful to her for that, and for saving my life. But to be real honest, my day was kind of ruined. I never saw my attacker or the nice teenage girl again after that day, and I said nothing to my mom because I was so embarrassed about what happened to me. But that and some other things that happened to me later cost me the most of the confident attitude I had as a child, and I'm a very shy and cautious person nowadays. So, girl who is willing to murder children over some harmless teasing